Okay, my name is Utkarsh. Prefer pronounce he, him. I will take beers after the 5th minute through chat. 1 second. I will begin my speech in three. I will begin my speech in three, two, one. Basically, what is the problem with NOTA? With the idea that problem of the outcome is the major problem that we are able to solve through the different comparatives that we have here. Either you abolish it or you either go through the guideline where no one is declared a winner. We are solving a major problem that we have that is kind of considered important in NOTA. That anyone can win regardless of the popular vote, and anyone can be regarded on the basis of if you are considering that the politicians that are running in the elections do not consider the needs of the elector population itself. Second of all, idea of the people who think and know about the politicians are highly limited, so the nota itself gives them a out of somehow that not knowing the election itself or a politician itself just gives them an out. Oh, I can vote nota, and this is a free way for me to go through. Second of all, why abolishing it does not work? It is still the probability that people will still vote from either of the candidates on the idea that they still do not have enough education about each of them. And second of all, they won't even participate. The basic idea from a whole case is if we have better democracy on each side, on whichever side we have better democracy in the end, which is more probable that people's voices are heard, and which side is able to create a better democracy where everyone is able to participate in the only way they can interact with the state, only way they can make their voices heard, instead of like the controlled manner in which the elections will be just based on the who is the lesser worst of option for each of them. Who does this affect? Who are the people that are voting? First of all, we want to consider the idea that privileged people either don't vote or either have or their own interest in mind. Who will give them tax breaks? Who will give them this? So nota does not matter in this case. Who are the people that are more marginalized and the major stakeholder in this case? First of all, the people whose votes and they consider themselves to be the people that want their state to care for them, whose votes majorly lead to consequences and majorly lead to them having direct life changing chances, like getting money from the state or getting better facilities or getting better education or get a better health care, is directly related to what they vote for. These people are majorly marginalized because they do not have enough income to be able to just tank everything whatever the decision that government makes. They want the government to work for them, and they do not consider the idea that if government doesn't work for them, we can just live our lives. Because majorly the ideas of like how subsidies are given, or ideas like how which sector they want to give money to, or ideas like whichever community they want to give reservations to, is majorly dealt with if the party they want to prefer to, which party has given this campaign, given this idea or promises through this campaign. So the idea of nota directly relates to the factor they are not choosing between the least bad option on either side. They are just choosing the option which is directly helping them. If neither of the parties directly are helping them, this directly leads them to choosing an option which is directly more important to them, because of the idea that the Supreme Court is telling them, if you choose this option, we will have a re-election. We will give them the signal of a feedback loop that these politicians need to make better promises or do better work in front of you, better outreach in front of you, to be able to make their needs and make their promises heard. Second of all, the idea, why do we, in this argument, how do we have better democracy on their side? First of all, any consideration of the problem is the idea that when you abolish nota, you are giving the people lesser choices. Why a lesser choice is bad? Because of the idea, you are limiting the ideas, how much they can go further, how much they can educate themselves, how much they can know which politician is getting them more powerful and getting them more choices. Second of all, they this leads to direct lesser participation, because of the idea most people do nota as a sign of protest, or the idea that they know that both candidates are bad, or the idea they do not know anything about the candidates and the candidates need to do a better job. There are three different scenarios, and in either of the circumstances these people are getting lesser choices itself. How do we get this? How do we solve this on the basic idea that you are able to get able to through the process of solving the idea that no one can win if you don't have the don't if nota becomes a majority, because of the idea when if nota becomes a majority, the politicians on both parties or majority parties get a signal that they have not done a good enough job of catering to the needs, because of the idea that majority parties have become distant from the needs of the marginalized. They have highly becoming international nationalized, and they have not catering to the major grassroots people whose vote directly lead to consequences on their own lives. Second of all, the idea that when you are able to create this idea that, if we are able to vote, we are creating a protest that these people cannot just run anything on their campaign, they cannot just win an election on anything that they promise on, they need to be able to hear from us, and this is the only way we can do this. So participation becomes more important because you have more choices. People will go to election, vote more, and be able to cast their ballots instead of just sitting at home or either casting on the two choices which they just consider worse off. Second of all, more education and more. Why is democracy important in the consideration that people do not have enough knowledge. Now the political parties have the responsibility of getting these people knowledge about these candidates. If they do not go to that village where people do not know about your candidate, they can just simply go vote nota. So you have a better idea that these politicians will need to teach them that these are the issues that you're facing and how we will solve this. Second of all, the idea of people having multiple interests. Politics have become a more and more populist in nature, with disconnection from the general public, need from because of the idea of lesser access to education and everything. We are giving them more access to education because it becomes a responsibility of politics for politicians itself to make them educated. Second of all, basic policies are more important than the idea of like anything other than that. So if you're able to reach this consequence, you're able to gain this knowledge of what you need. Finally, on the idea of like who will run this, on the basic idea of when re-election happens, the transition period will be run by an interim government or whatever. The IS officers will still be there. There still be people who are running this place or constituency. Later, then there's a limited amount of period, where re-elections need to happen. So the union and officers can still make those certain amount of lesser in the lesser amount of time. Yeah, thank you.
Time. House thanks the Prime Minister for that fine speech. Welcome the Leader of Opposition to begin their case.
Hi, now I can't hear him going as leader of opposition. Just a sec. Uh, cool. Starting with my speech in three, two, one. Firstly, on the idea of choice, right? I think it's okay. Can you start the timer? And OC number. I just self-time myself. Okay. Cool.
I think you can start your speech. Don't think I would
Okay, okay,
be.
we'll time them. It's better. Thank you.
I'll
Yeah, you
ask for
can
a
time.
minute, the fifth minute.
All right, that's cool. You can start.
Starting with my speech in three, two, one. Okay, firstly on idea of choice, right? I think it's okay if you are given lesser choices in democracy. If this is the quality. Yeah. Okay. Restarting in three, two, one. Cool. On the area of choices. So I think even if you have lesser choices, it's fine because if you're able to like have more quality of choices, if you're actually able to like make like probably you're able to have better choices. What does that mean, right? I think like biggest democracies, US and UK, they probably just have like two parties. I think it's still fine. So what exactly are we like trying to do in this debate, right? I think it's okay. So to a larger extent, the idea of like probably giving a signal to these parties that you're not doing well, or like most people are voting for Nota and not for any of you. I think that would probably exist regardless, right? Election Commission does exist. They still want to increase voter turnout and at all points. So if let's say people don't want to vote for any parties, they probably won't show up in the first place, or you have like lesser voter turnouts, and like most like commissions would just go ahead and say that you need to go ahead and do something, or they'll probably take or do some actions to go ahead and increase the amount of voter turnouts, probably doing more electoral awareness campaigns and all those sort of things. So I think those things will always exist, right? So which means there will always be taken any sort of like action to incentivize people to go ahead and vote in election, or to probably make them come into these at a larger extent. But then secondly, right, what exactly I mean, so what is the major problem? I think the problem is in and of itself the re-election, right? So firstly, the problem with re-election is when people are going ahead and when Nota gets more vote than any of the parties existing, you are stuck in this policy paralysis problem, right? That is, you can't go ahead and like there won't be any new policies that will be passed during the period. Even like elections start happening, you probably go ahead and finish off all the policies that you started, or like most governments did. So there won't be any newer changes that would be happening. Even if you have like bureaucrats taking care, you won't be able to go ahead and incentivize or create something new overall during that time. So I think like people in general have to go through the period for longer time. So there won't be like newer policies that could be passed during this time and of itself. So people would not be like benefiting out of this. But also secondly, re-elections are much more like expensive, right? You have to go ahead and set up like go ahead and like get more people, get or like set up all these schools, and like probably go ahead and like hire people to go ahead and get the election duty done and all the sort of things. All these money are like the taxpayers' money, right? Right. So it's not going to be used for the welfare of the people, but rather for them to actually just have again another chance to just vote the people who will go ahead and do this welfare. So that's an opportunity cost lost in of itself. So like, but also most important, with more elections happening or more re-elections happening frequently, people lose the value that they attach for elections. The turnout will probably be lesser in the next election, right? Because you just voted for it. If it's once in 5 years, that's when probably people will be okay in going and spending their 5 hours waiting in line and then voting in that election. They won't want to like do that often, like let's say once in like every month, or like a month after another, like that, right? So I think that the value for election reduces, and not a lot of people will show up for this election in of itself. But crucially, where is this debate happening? When will probably this huge situation happen? And lastly, this debate is happening in India. I think like most people either favor the authoritarian party that is existing, BJP to a larger extent, or they don't like that party and they don't think that there are any other opportunities or any other alternatives which they favor in of itself. I think these are the people who go ahead and vote for Nota, or feel that it's like no other alternative which can probably go ahead and give them any sort of policy. So they don't like the majority party that is existing, and they don't think the other parties are a viable option. I think the problem is this, right? One, you're never giving a chance to opposition parties or to think whether they can actually go ahead and do anything. Chance can only be given, or you will know whether they are efficient or not, only if they probably come to power, at least to some extent. How is that better our comparison? I think if have like if no because let's say like how the campaigning will probably go ahead and like happen, right? On your side, most opposition parties just want to go ahead and get this re-election, or probably want BJP to just lose to NOTA, or probably want the authoritarian party to just lose to VOTA, right? Because that will probably give them another chance. So they are not going ahead and campaigning for themselves to win, or to prove that they are probably better candidates than the other side, but rather to go ahead and like prove that the existing alternative that you have is not good, so you should probably go ahead and it's okay even if you vote for NOTA. I think that's where you feel that there is no other positive like alternative existing. It's the campaigning problem in of itself that makes people people believe that they don't have other options, and that's why they go ahead and probably and they're stuck in this like echo chamber, right? So they go ahead and vote for Nota, thinking that there's no other option. On our side, right, the comparative is simple. I think this is where most parties would probably go ahead and do much more positive like outcomes, or probably go ahead and like make much more like policy campaigning, right? That they'll be able to go ahead and probably give more free water, or like probably go ahead and establish more free education and all of those things. They try to cater what like public necessarily wants, so that they can go ahead and at least have a chance. People opposition would try to go ahead and try to fight for winning on our side, because on their side you just want to go ahead and you think that every election you might have better chance. So okay, and you probably that's when you start like talking negative about the other party that is already existing, because it's like David versus Goliath, right? So you think that you can't defeat them, and you just try to go ahead and like talk negative about the existing party. Cool. I think on our side you probably like pay heed to this. You think that because there's no Nota existing, you probably go ahead, and if you think that you don't want to vote for the authority, you'll go ahead and vote, or probably just give some choice to the thing. Even if you don't like all of them, you probably vote for the one that you dislike the least, right? Or the opposition party to dislike the least, and that's when you give at least some chance to an opposition party on our side, and there's at least some chance that is existing for them. Cool. Yeah. Before moving on, POI.
Yeah, feedback mechanisms don't exist on your side because people who are dissatisfied don't turn up to vote. The least bad person goes through.
Cool. I think they're okay with that trade-off. Why? Because on our side, we at least have some government. On your side, you probably don't necessarily have any government happening. But most people will probably go ahead and just vote for Nota. Re-elections happening. There won't be any stable government existing, right? At the end of the day, this is a democracy. And I think the basic principle of democracy is sure representation, but also you want to get at least something represented in first place for that representation to actually happen. On your side, governments won't be able to even form, and it will take more time for these governments to be formed in of itself. But also, I think on like feedback mechanism, right? More often than not, parties want to go ahead and probably continue that victory streak, or probably want to do better in next elections. That's why that's why the ones that are losing will probably go ahead and listen to more people, or like probably go ahead and talk to more people and find out their opinions. This happens a lot, right? You see Rahul Gandhi going ahead and talking to like JNU students and all those sort of things. They'll voluntarily go ahead and take this feedback mechanism. At least like the ones who are losing will probably go ahead and do that. And that's why you probably cater to those people who are not necessarily voting, and probably try to find out why they are not exactly voting. On your side, this is done by like state system existing. I don't necessarily see how they will know why people are not voting enough itself. They don't have data on that. On our side, like the parties who are losing will probably exclusively go ahead and find that on our side. That incentive doesn't exist. Very proud to oppose.
House thanks Leader of Opposition for that fine speech. Welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue your government's case.
Hi, give me 20 seconds, please. All right. I'll take a POI in the chat after the 5th minute. Please ask for one. And starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The biggest problem with our case is re-elections, right? So here is how I'm going to break that down. The first thing I'm going to tell you is why re-elections are so unlikely to happen anyways. But the second thing I'm going to tell you, even if they happen, why that's so much better off than what happens on their side, right? The first thing is they try to paint that like re-elections are such a huge problem because so many constituencies are not going to have any new laws passed and all the sorts of things, right? The first thing is that I don't think re-elections are going to happen at such a large scale as they paint out to be. This is why, right? I think at the point where this is a prefers motion, 1 second. At the point where this is a prefers motion, you probably have this sort of recommendation in the world, like in the political system anyways, right? Which means parties already know before the elections that this is something that is going to happen, that the Nota vote is going to have some weightage and all the sorts of things, right? At that point, they already have incentive to do better or to reach out to more people and actually hear about what they want and make policies according to that, right? If that's going to happen, people are going to vote for these parties because they are actually listening to them, right? This doesn't happen on their side, because if you don't have a nota vote, the first thing that's likely to happen is people just don't turn up to vote at all, right? Because know that people vote nota because either like they don't know enough about the politicians, which only happens if politicians do absolutely nothing for them, or two, they dislike both parties to the extent where they would rather vote for no one and don't think that like the elections are of any on their side. You necessarily don't have this choice at all. But I think on our side, when parties know that they have to do better, because otherwise when people vote nota, this vote actually counts and neither of them win, you probably have more likelihood anyway for politicians to go ahead and do well and like listen to people in the first place, right? Which means that re-elections happen in extremely limited areas, because at the most people are still going to be better off in elections themselves, right? But I think the second reason for that is that people want power, right? So even in the most like rural of areas, etc., you can't tell me that there won't be politicians, because these politicians make like the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha and all the sorts of things, which means they do still have big responsibilities, which means they have incentive to do well for the people in these regions, because people in these regions, it's easy to become popular with them if you actually do good things for them, because no one else does it, right? Which means that you can still have this sort of power in the national government simply if you do them well, even though they might be in more rural areas and all the sorts of things. Which means all sorts of constituencies in India will have decent politicians step up if they know that unless they do well, you will necessarily vote nota and they won't, like neither side then wins, right? I think then the problem is money, like it costs a lot of money and new policies, etc., right? At the point where I've already proved to you that this re-election is probably not going to happen at such a large scale, the money that you then spend or like the policies, etc., are probably going to also be limited in scale, right? And know that any sort of new policies that they have an opportunity cost of like they try to say that, oh, there won't be any new policies. I don't think that harm actually stands, because at the point where majority people are literally voting nota in your area, it probably means they don't like the politicians anyway, right? I don't think the politicians are probably very competent anyways, or like are going to pass some great policies that help these people, insofar as these people are voting in like majority of nota for them, right? Which means that even if they are elected in absence of any other choices, I don't think they're going to pass some great policies, and therefore I don't think there is then some great opportunity cost, right? I think then taken off re-elections, and Utkarsh has already dealt with how you still have functioning of all essential services and all rights are still intact, simply because the Supreme Court and Election Commission is still involved in like creating these guidelines, right? I think at that point the like cost of re-elections or like the problems that they have with that are extremely limited, right? And know that in their entire speech they have absolutely zero positive as to why abolishment of nota is actually going to be a good thing, yeah? A good thing. Here's why that's not going to happen. The one thing they have to say is that people are forced to vote and less choices are okay as long as this quality of choices are good, right? Here's why this quality of choices aren't going to be good, because know that in areas where people are literally voting nota in the majority, it probably means that they aren't satisfied with either party, right? Which means that the quality of these politicians is probably not good, and I don't think like it's not true democracy simply because it isn't exactly representing what people want. Because if nine out of 10 people don't want either party, but one out of 10 still chooses someone, you still get elected in, right? I think at that point this is not quality, this is literally just you as a government being unable to provide your people with good representation and all the sorts of things, and they have absolutely no links to prove to me otherwise, right? But I think then they don't really deal with Snigdha's POI of why we have better feedback mechanisms, right? Note, here is why. On their side, when you abolish nota, you probably have to go ahead and two things happen, right? One, I've already told you why people simply don't show up, but two, the second thing that happens is you probably vote for like whatever options you have if you do show up to vote, right? Here is how this turns out. I think they tell you that, oh, somehow on their side majority parties aren't going to win, right? But know that India is a country of majorities, right? So if I am a Hindu majority person and I still don't like the BJP, on my side I still have the option to vote nota, because I can see that they are like trying to divide people on religions and things like that. But I think on their side, when you don't give them that option, you are likely still to vote for the majority party simply because they are aligned with your religion or aligned with like majoritarian views and things like that. So you will still go ahead and vote for them instead of like crossing the barrier and suddenly voting liberal, right? I think at that point the fence sitters don't necessarily go liberal as they try to tell you, but they probably are always going to vote conservative because you're still a part of the majority and you still want to hold up majoritarian views even if you don't exactly agree with the party, right? I think on our side, even if I as a fence sitter or like even if I am someone who's from the majority but not necessarily voting for the conservative party, has a choice to vote nota simply so that parties actually put some actual effort in policies and things like that, right? Know that when this happens, you probably have better feedback mechanisms because politicians actually care about making policies and not simply dividing on like religious lines or like populist lines as you can on their side, because on their side you have to vote for either party and one party will go through, which is always probably going to be the majority party, right? I don't think if there is a chance of re-election somehow the majority party has more of a chance to win because they've always had more of a chance to win. There is absolutely no delta there, right? But I think on our side you probably have more of a chance for other parties to come in simply if they make better policies and all those sorts of things, right? I know that simply because you know how many people are voting nota, you have a better feedback mechanism in terms of more survey or more data, which helps the nation know that like in which areas politicians are lacking or doing absolutely nothing, right? As opposed to on their side when people you don't have that data because people simply don't turn up, so you're like decreasing citizen participation, which is like extremely bad, right? And Snigdha is going to further impact by having low voter turnout and bad citizen participation is so bad for democracy, right? I think on all these counts we take because they don't have any positive matter and they don't really deal with how they're going to provide any of these things better than we do. So yeah, for all those reasons would come.
House thanks the Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. We welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue opposition's case.
Hi, am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Cool. This is Aditya Jha going as DLO. POI is just via chat, preferably after the 5th minute. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Three things which are absolutely symmetric on both the sides. The first thing to note is that their case is there is no way in which you can get feedback as to people don't like you as a political party. But they also say that on our side, people probably do not vote in and of itself. That action of not voting is in and of itself a signal to the political parties in general and to the governments in particular that people are not really not really politically inclined or are not completely satisfied with the way you are going ahead and working in the first place. We think this signal is also crucial because of the image which democracies portray to other countries and to international bodies in general, which means why is India considered as like largest democracies? Because it has large number of political turnout and voter turnout and political participation. If you don't believe me, believe at least what Prime Minister told you in their speech, because according to them this debate is about minority communities and poor people who need urgent solutions to their daily problems, which means they are completely dependent on political parties and they want them to work for them and they do not want a hung parliament, which means if everything which they say about the incentives of this voter is true, then it is presumably that even on our side, because these poor people are dependent on political parties for their day-to-day activities, this looks like subsidies, free electricity, free food, whatever, they are likely to go ahead and vote for at least some party even on our side. It is unclear why these people suddenly just don't go to voter pool on our side in the first place, which means turnout is something which is likely to exist significantly even on our side of the house. The second thing which remains symmetric is incentives of parties to frame good policies or campaign in a better manner. Because notice, even on our side of the house, elections are happening, which means there are multiple parties who are still competing to get the votes of people in general. It is unclear why simply a threat of like re-election or people voting nota is the tipping point for parties to go ahead and frame better policies for people, which means even parties on our side have incentives to research people's preferences and to go ahead and frame memorandums and propagandas in line with these people's preferences so that they are able to go ahead and get this. Their case is that on their side somehow opposition parties get this unique realization that we have a chance during re-election because now we will market better policies as compared to the majoritarian party. Problem is this: if you can come up with this brilliant strategy in 15 minutes of case prep, probably they could have done so even on our side right now as well. Which means even on our side, opposition parties have the capacity to go ahead and research on voters' preferences and to come up with better policies than a majoritarian ruling party right now. Which means competition is completely symmetric, and therefore incentives remain to make good policies. The last last thing which remains symmetric is on the value of choice. They say having more choices, even if it comes in the form of nota, is very, very important. We have two responses to this. Firstly, it's unclear on why choices are significantly important in democracy, because the largest democracies in the world, like United States and like UK, are simply two-party democracies. We don't think that's a failed model. You have to ground that principle. But I'll beat that principle right now. Notice choice is only meaningful insofar as it is A, informed, and B, effective. It is not informed in this particular like world, because according to, again, their own framing, read your notes, they say that people generally are unaware and do not have information about political processes in India. If that is true, then the best case which happens on their side is again and again, due to re-election and campaigning, people are brainwashed into thinking that, hey, vote for me, by giving them false promises and by telling them, like, by just giving them cash, or like or like threatening them to go ahead and vote for them in the first place. It is unclear why people become more aware and therefore make more informed choices during the re-election phase on their side of the house, which means choice does not matter because it is not informed. The second thing I want you to note is that even if people somehow become more informed, and even if Snigdha proves it in her whip speech, the problem is that it's not effective. And this is my extension. I'll prove to you why in their best case, when actually you go ahead and like cater to areas where large number of people do not like the current party and therefore are voting for nota, and therefore you are going ahead and having a re-election, why is even then the country remain unrepresentative of voters preferences? There are two reasons on why elections and political parties do not change significantly even when you threaten them with re-election. The first thing to note here is that some people, like majority people, voted for nota, but there is still someone who got the second highest number of votes, and there is still someone who got the third and fourth highest number of votes. The crucial thing to note here is that the second highest party is unlikely to change its like leader, or is unlikely to change its objectives significantly, because they do not want to lose the core voters or support base which they currently have. Which means if I have 30 out of 100 seats right now, even if I do not have a majority, I don't want to change my leader, candidate, and objectives significantly, because then I might even lose the 30 people who voted for me right now. But secondly, even if you go ahead and change your party objectives, they are much more likely to be extreme and strategic on their side of the house. This looks like I'm desperate to win election, so I'll promise just whatever and whenever on their side of the house. I'll say, hey, win me election this second time, I'll give you everything for free. I'll give you 5,000 rupees to every person in return of me winning the election. Before moving forward on why this is harmful, POI.
On your side, people are much more likely to get away with like campaigning against the other side and not really providing any policies, simply because people have to choose between two parties. On our side, people who are unhappy with either parties do
Got
have
it,
their
got
voice counted, which is why you have higher voter turnout in the first place.
got it. Final, imagine yourself as a minor opposition party. You know that you are in minority. You know that you cannot win the election. On their side, you get this option to bitch about the majority party, because you have this extra option that you just want people to vote for nota. You don't even want people to vote for you. You just want people to be brainwashed into thinking that the current ruling party is an extremely shitty party. If you are successfully able to do so, you can force the state into re-election, and therefore you think that you have more chances to win the next election. Which means negative campaigning is a harm on their side, because opposition parties get this exclusive opportunity to vote and to force the state into re-election on their side. On our side, opposition parties, you do not have this choice, which means you are forced to make positive campaigning, and this takes away, co-opts every benefit which Dia talks about in terms of you going ahead and researching voter preferences and therefore campaigning for better policies as compared to majority party on our side of the house. Lastly, on why short-term policies is bad is because, yeah, it's harmful for economy. Impacting on WIP, very proud to oppose.
House thanks the leader, deputy leader of opposition for that fine speech. We now welcome the government week. Continue government.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. If at any point I cut out, please let my teammates know. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I don't think op ever gets good feedback. Why? Because the narrative on op, where you don't have nota, is that some party has to win, which means that there is one party that you know will win. which means that the feedback that other political parties are getting is that, look, there is one party that is winning for some particular reason. What we need to do to win is do the same things. This is literally what is happening with Congress emulating, like going out and reaching out and like copying BJP's marketing strategies and reaching out to like poorer minorities, giving them the same kind of handouts the way that BJP is, right? We think this is tremendously bad for the trend that it brings up in politics for several reasons. First, it is never truly accommodating of the type of preferences that people have, right? But second, it isn't really creating more diversity within politics and policies themselves, because people are just like replicating one model or the other. But why is this something why is like feedback collection something that's better on our side, right? And here's so much material that comes out at Dia and Utkarsh that goes completely unresponded to, right? What we characterize right up from Utkarsh is that the nature of people, like the participants or the voters within democracy, is actually very, very disgruntled. People on the ground really hate everyone within government, because they really don't think that they're being represented, right? Which means they express this dissatisfaction by not being able to vote for either side. I think the way that LO tries to respond to this is to say that, oh, look, if people are so disgruntled, they just don't turn out to vote themselves. We tell you that's not the case, right? We tell you that the type of people who don't vote are people who are privileged, are people who don't care about politics, or who are just very insulated within their own circle, within their own privilege, to care about what the consequence of a vote is. But the type of people who do vote and who do vote NOTA are likely to be people from these poorer backgrounds, right? Why do we then tell you that feedback is better, and feedback and insight collection is better on their side? Which I think that DLO's response was very flippant, right? Here's the mechanism as to why exactly you collect feedback. Notice, if you assume what is true from the example in the context side, where you have 9 out of 10 people voting NOTA, there's obviously going to be questions as to why exactly so many people are voting NOTA, right? You can have administrative bodies looking into exactly why so many people, especially people from poorer communities, are not voting for people of anyone that they choose, right? To which their response is that, oh, look, re-election will happen, and re-election causes loads of expenses, and that is bad. They already sufficiently proves why re-elections are unlikely. But even if they prove that re-elections are likely, I think they can be taken out by simple, like all of their material on like re-election spending, and it's going to be so bad because it's going to take out of welfare, can be like all that material can be washed out for through simple regulation, right? This regulation can look like 3 things. First, you can probably go ahead and limit the number of re-elections that can be held within a year. You can probably create limits on the type of politicians that are running within a party, where you can't have the same politician run on the same policies for 2 consecutive terms, something like that. Which also answers what like Aditya had to say about how people don't want to change their party leaders, so re-election don't really yield results, right? But the third thing to note, and this is very important, is that you can obviously, as an administrative body, limit the amount of spending for campaigning, right, within re-election. What does this then do? This like, takes out their ideas on, oh, look, election spending is going to take out of welfare. But even if I don't convince you of any of this, panel, look, it's a very weak argument to say that re-election is going, like people within re-election are going to overspend so much that they won't invest on welfare. I think what happens is that there's very, very specific budgets allocated to elections themselves, and there's very, very specific budgets going into welfare. I don't think there's like transfusion of those budgets so much so that the state isn't able to function and give out welfare to the people that it serves. I don't think that particularly works, right? Cool then. Why is it that on opposition you have more vote buying, more populism just getting worse, right? And what are the consequences of low voter turnout? First, I think that why is it that vote buying is likely to be worse, right? And which is a direct impact what Dia talks to you about, why exactly the worst party is likely to go through when you have lesser choices. First, I think and this is something that DLO also concedes, right? Wherein when they say that, look, you are still voting for poor people are still voting for one party because they still want some sort of social benefits. What the consequence of this becomes is that you tethered the entire value of a vote to the material goods that a person is able to get, which means that you're able to tell people that, look, you have to make a choice anyway. You vote for my party, I give you this. And this becomes very, very short termist, where you are keeping people tethered to the idea of giving them material goods instead of changing their life structurally the way that you're supposed to do as a politician, right? We think this causes a tremendous bad trend within politics and the type of politicians who come up, because you're only tethering the value of a vote to like the goods that people get, right? Rather, on our side, where you have clearer understanding of
You
what
are
people actually want, you're able to structurally change their lives, right? Why is it then that low voter turnout is something that is bad and something that we uniquely deal with? But before that, I'll take you.
you are inconsistent. Either push low voter turnout, in which sense it
Yeah.
acts as feedback on our side, or say that large number of people who are poor will
No,
actually
no.
vote for
These
someone.
are very independent mechanisms. Okay. Op tries to confuse you and say that, look, there's going to be low voter turnout on our side, but that isn't true, right? You, like, from what Elo concedes on opposition, you are reducing the choices that people have, which means that you're from on our side, people can choose nota, which they do. On op, they don't have that choice, which naturally means that when people don't have more choices, these disgruntled people that have characterized to you don't show up to the polls, which means that there's less data that you collect on people, which means that there's less data that you collect on why exactly, like, what exactly these what exactly people's preferences are with respect to their politicians, right? Rather, on their side, what you think is that, oh, some political party is winning, someone is doing something right, just copy them. I've already proven that to you. Okay, with low voter turnout, what happens is that there's increased apathy that people develop with the state machinery, right? People think that the state no longer represents them, which means that this becomes like a continuous cycle where people don't vote, and this like proliferates because they tell people around them to not vote because the state is just not listening to them. So for all those reasons, proud to propose, yeah.
House thanks government whip for that fine speech. Welcome the opposition whip speaker to continue opposition's case.
Yeah, just 30 seconds.
Opposition whip, it's past 30 seconds you requested.
Yeah, Tanya going as opposition whip will start by prefer mode of POE at the fifth minute by raise of hand. With that, starting my speech on the self count of three, two, one. I'll do firstly prove why NOTA is a bad feedback mechanism. Then I'll prove harms of re-election. But why will re-election happen most of the time when elections happen on their side? And why, even if you have a good party after re-election, there will be so less legitimacy to that party, that entire democratic process which you are trying to defend from the first speech falls. I don't understand. After pressing nota, what does it even lead to? That is to say, yeah, agreed and conceded that nota shows dissatisfaction. But I don't understand why nota itself indicates that. That is to say, government and large and people in general know, the governments know that the people are dissatisfied in and of itself. That is to say, even if it showed dissatisfaction, I don't understand because it does not give any better options, right? That is to say, when I am forced to choose, at least researchers can now see which parties are getting votes, etc. Nota does absolutely nothing. It just means a wasted vote. It does have it does not incentivize parties to do better, etc. Because what nota essentially does is make sure that or lead to famous parties winning. That is to say, you have to understand that major or like rich parties, they have a lot of campaigning money, etc., which means when people have lesser knowledge of all the parties who exist, which means people are generally apolitical or unaware or not that invested in the political process, then they either go ahead and press nota, or they see that, hey, maybe this party who's in power currently, it's better. So they either choose nota or the party in power. And that is why, because the party in power has the capacity to invest so much money in the campaigning process, etc., they are likely to win even in the re-election process. And that is why nota, not having nota will have a lot of benefits. That is to say, if I hate the party in power right now and I know that I have to vote, that is to say, a lot of people feel that voting is an inherent way they are showing, and they feel powerful, as if I influence democracy or I feel the part of a democratic process. And that is why people are gonna come in general to vote, because they care about voting, and how there are a lot of awareness campaigns showing how voting is your right and how you should do so. And that is why on your side, if I am angry, I hate bureaucracy, there are bad roads, I have to pay a lot of taxes, there is inflation, I am just tensed about my life, etc., in this rage and this dissatisfaction, I am likely to go ahead and press nota. At least on our side, at least now I am forced to weigh the different options I have. That is to say, now I have some incentives and I'll use some rationale to choose. That is to say, I don't want to opt out of the voting process. That is why I'm forced to take a stance or choose something. And that is why at least something happens on our side. Politicians still have very similar incentives to go ahead and make good policies. That is to say, on either side, politicians want to come to power. So I don't understand having or not having nota was the biggest reason for them to go ahead and work. That is to say, a lot of benefits you say are not exclusive in nature. But secondly, understand the harms of pressing nota compounds when you increase its power. That is to say, nota now is extremely powerful on your side. And that is why these people who are extremely angry and dissatisfied in the government are going to likely go ahead and press nota. And that is why will re-election happen. Re-election has so many harms, leading to like administrative and logistic issues of resource time. They're extremely expensive in nature. They use taxpayers' money. After that, a lot of security, etc., which means sometimes police and military, etc., is also required to set up elections, and all of this have to compound over time on your side, because a re-election has to take place again and again. There is a problem of voter fatigue. That is to say, if I have to vote for one time, I will go, but now I am now tired of the process and likely to opt out of participating because I'm forced to vote again and again on your side. But understand that it also leads to policy paralysis and political instability. That is to say, when elections are approaching, we are not allowed, or the government in general is not allowed to create new policies, because elections are very near. And that is why, because you take a lot of elections, it leads to policy paralysis and political instability. This uncertainty in the political process on your side give bad geopolitical image, and you need to do double the amount of campaigning. When you have to do so much campaigning, rich parties have more and more chances of going ahead and being in power. But understand, even if I don't buy any of things, understand, if re-election successfully happens on their side, then what is the problem? A person who came to power because a successful re-election took place, the problem is there is lesser legitimacy of the winning party. That is to say, the candidate in power will be perceived weak. And that is why people will have lesser and lesser trust on him, because hey, he is a product of re-election. And that is why people at large will reduce legitimacy of the entire election process on your side. But why good policy, but why voter turnout is a better feedback mechanism? Understand, now on our side, if I see that 30% of the voters are not even coming to vote, what it leads to is current newer party who now understand that the party in power is maybe having dissatisfied people. That is to say, when I see that voter turnout decreasing, and I as a new party will now go ahead and have all the incentives in the world to go ahead and appeal to these people who are currently not voting because they are dissatisfied by the government. And that is why voter mechanism also show the same, reduced voter turnouts also show the same kind of symmetric feedback mechanism we talk about. But understand that why poor people have incentives to vote nota. See, they are unaware, which means they are easier to brainwash. So what they will do is vote for the party who give them maximum amounts of money, etc., or manipulate them. And that is why they at least prefer some government who is able to give them welfare schemes or maybe health infrastructure, etc. and because on your side there is this shaky uncertain political environment, they'll not be likely to be happy, because you need a stable government in and of itself, even if a little bad, etc., to carry out these welfare schemes. But understand that after re-election even also takes place, some party wins, right? And I don't understand why will that party be like any better than the previous candidates. At least on our side there is some incentives for these people who won in of itself to go ahead and make some rational choices, because again, because people are so angry at the government, they are likely to vote nota. But why is good policy or representative democracy symmetrics? Parties still want to come to power, which means they have to work. But understand that media callouts, etc., exist, which means they need these kind of votes, and that is why they are forced to work on all sides of the house. But understand they care about their geopolitical image, or how are they perceived, or how media can call out when a bad policy is made, or an underrepresented policy is made. And that is why good policies are largely symmetric. And that is why the feedback mechanism they talk about falls. But understand that unless you do extremely well in election, nota is certainly will be pressed. And that is why at least on our side, voters are forced to make some choice and take a stance. It is better overall for democracy. With that, proud to oppose.
House thanks the opposition whip. We now welcome the opposition reply.
I guess the chair disconnected. Yeah. Well, wait for.
Hello.
Yes, chair, you're audible.
All right. Sorry, my network just disconnected for a little, but I'm back. So, opposition reply speaker, you are up.
Cool. Aditya went as DLO, going as op reply. Starting reply in 3, 2, 1. Well, note how soft their stance is. Because half of deputy speech was how the likelihood of re-election happening, or the cases where majority of people do not like any of the present options, is so low that it should not factor into this debate. And then the whip's speech starts by quoting the context slide that we are talking about situations where 9 out of 10 like 9 out of 10 people just hate all the political parties, and according to them that's the state or that's the preferences of large number of people in India right now. We do not agree, but we are not here to fact check them. We are just here to point out the inconsistency on where their case exactly lie. If everything which the deputy said is true and chances of re-election happening is very very low, which means there are very few people who want to go ahead and press for nota even right now. If that is true, then their positive case is severely undercut. What is their positive case? One, you get feedback that people don't like political parties. They never prove the exclusivity of this feedback and why this is the most effective and the only way to present this feedback that I hate you as a party to the political party. We gave you multiple other alternatives. You can just opt out of the voting process and this in and of itself act as a feedback to the parties in general. They say that administrative entities will go ahead and research on why are people opting for nota. The same administrative agencies can also research on our side on why are people not turning out to vote in the first place. The second thing which we tell you is that feedbacks can also be gathered from other alternative mechanisms like protest, like going ahead and like just writing a bad tweet on social media. And these are much effective because you can do that anytime whenever you want. But elections only happen like once in 5 years. So it's unclear why this is the most effective way for you to go ahead and express your discontent with the political parties in general. But lastly, you can express your discontent through the like when the initial campaigning process is going on. The politician comes to your door, tells you that, hey, vote for me, I will do this, this, this. You don't like it, you tell them, just change your policies. It's unclear why this, again, nota is the only and most effective feedback mechanism which they have. But lastly, we tell you that normal competition incentives still remain, which means opposition parties and majority parties still want to get into power, which means they have all the incentives to research people's preferences and frame good policies on our side as well. And none of this feedback matters if everything which the deputy says is true and the number of people who are opting for nota is anyway going to be less. Therefore, chances of re-election going to be less. The second thing which they talk about is representation. It's a faulty principle because a representative democracy cannot be fully representative anyways. They had to prove by re-election and the party which comes out of it is the one who is more representative to the people. Because if everything which they said is true, then the majority party, and this is a concession made by DPM, when they say that even after re-election, likelihood is that majority party and authoritarian party is anyway going to be get re-elected, then I don't see the value of this representation. On the comparative, the harm is very, very exclusive, which is to say you spend a lot ton like shit ton of resources, time, money, effort, etc. on conducting a re-election during which four exclusive harms accrue on their side. The first exclusive harm is policy paralysis because you cannot go ahead and serve people during the time of re-election. This is extremely harmful and which they never engage and properly weigh and reply is too late to do that. Is that people, if according to their framing, people are poor and unaware and are dependent on parties, then probably having a government is better than having no government because the government is the one who will take care of these people in the first place. The second exclusive harm is that due to re-elections, people become more frustrated and opt out of the election process as a whole, which means the voter turnout is likely to be even less on the second time the elections are held because I just don't want to vote every day of my life. The third harm on their side is that you never allow opposition parties to come up, which only happens on our side when opposition party is when there is no choice of voter nota, and therefore you might go ahead and push for opposition parties. But lastly, parties do negative campaigning on their side because they just want to push the state into re-election. On our side, they do not have that option, so they do positive campaigning and try to show themselves as better parties. For all these reasons, very proud to oppose.
House thanks to opposition reply speaker for that fine speech. We now welcome government reply speaker to summarize the entire debate.
Yeah, my name is Utkarsh. I will be going as reply. Um, I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, this is a debate. Not everything can be symmetric. First of all, they claim that you are not opting out. You are not opting out because because the idea is that you are voting something. You are choosing NOTA. So when there is a majority in this guideline, there's your vote shows. No one is winning and no one gets the power. Second of all, they do not have any benefits on their side. They do not weigh any kind of show that how abolition is solving any problems that they push on us. Second, third of all, negative campaigning will happen on our side. How this does not make sense. First of all, think about this. If NOTA exists, you lost, and if it won and re-election happened, you lost to a candidate who did not even have any policies, who wasn't even running in the election, and still large amount of majority of the people hated you. Fourth of all, they say choices are able to be freely given away because of the idea, because USA has a two-party system, so it's good enough. USA having the system is not a mechanism to prove that choices are less. I can prove that choices are good because people are getting more ideas of what they want to live in a constituency where people care about their choices. People care about what they want in this situation rather than what two-party systems in USA works like. This is their major claim that wins them the debate. They say low voter turnout is equal to the idea of NOTA working. There's a heat wave going around in Delhi, which led to a 50% reduction in voter turnout. Does this mean that people are protesting against what the campaigning of the election was? Does this mean that people did not like either of the candidates or either of the people that were running the election or any kind of education that they had? This does not directly lead to any kind of data. Low voter turnout is directly dependent on so many factors that people are not just suggesting that people hate you, they just consider it to be on other factors. On our side, we have better feedback, which is exclusive because people know that you need to do better outreach, better education, better policies that are directly important to the people that are marginalized and need this voter because of the vote, because the vote directly leads to the consequences that impact their life. So finally, why we win this debate is basically because no one challenges the basic principle how democracy becomes better. They say democracy becomes, I say democracy becomes better because two things. If you are making an informed choice, that's better than just voting for either of the candidates because which one is worse. So idea is you are the incentives on the political parties to make you educated because they don't want to go into a re-election, or just the idea that you don't want the other party to win becomes two-sided and becomes manifolded and increased when you do not do this. Second of all, when there's more participation, more voices are heard. When you have an external choice, when you have an extra choice, you just have more people going into voting. Lower voter turnout does not show this at all because you can go because you were watching a movie at your home and you missed the election. That is not data. This is direct protest and directly showing what the people need. Second of all, we bite the bullet. Elections might be expensive and re-elections might be expensive. The idea is democracy is based on people getting their voices heard. If 5 years of election is just based on, oh, majority of the people did not even choose you and still you won the election and still making laws, that is worse off than the idea of some thousand, some lakhs of rupees that you're wasting in a re-election. That is bad than anything that they want to say. Then they say at whip speech, I was still content with it. Legitimacy of the actor is reduced. It is still an election. People are going to voting booths and still choosing you versus any of the options. They're still seeing your campaign because you need to do a campaign before an election. So legitimacy is not even an argument in this case. So finally, they say that, oh, they will continue to do elections. How far-fetched is this? Is a basic idea that it's not going to be Supreme Court just letting you do multiple. These are guidelines that are decided by Election Commission and Supreme Court. We have already contended with this. Thank you.
Thank you, government reply speaker, for that fine speech. This brings us to the end of the entire debate. Teams, um, shake hands virtually, and you can exit the room. Or come, we get back to you. Thank you, everyone. You can exit so that I and my panelists can conclude on results.
Thank you for the